Hey YouTube, what's up? Before I get started, I want to first ask why or what do you want to learn from this video? Now I want to welcome you to the second video of my Modern Warfare Beginner's Guide series. This video will help all new and beginner players by teaching and showing you my best settings for console players on Modern Warfare. And if you haven't yet, first make sure you subscribe, like this video, and then we'll get straight into it, guys. Hey everyone, I'm CJ Gamer and welcome to a Modern Warfare Beginner's Guide video. This one is one of the most important in the series because it all starts with your settings. Now, as always, I want to shout out my squad DBlitz97, Monster Killer, and JC Bad Gaming. These guys are amazing. Be sure to check their channels out in the description. Before I get into it, I'll say that best settings changes the way your gameplay looks and feels. These are all things that help me play good at Modern Warfare. I'll individually go over each setting and break them down to give you my advice on what's best. Let's get started. The controller tab. The first section here is controls with 10 parts. Button layout preset. This is the first of the settings you will see and ultimately determines how you play. The default has the buttons set to how you would play COD regularly. A or X for jumping and mantling, B or circle for crouching, proning or sliding, X or square for using and reloading, Y or triangle for switching weapons, D-pad for various actions depending on the game mode, the left middle button on Xbox or the middle button on PS4 to check the scoreboard, the right middle button for Xbox and PS4 to check the pause menu, LB or L1 to use tactical equipment, RB or R1 to use lethal equipment, LT or L2 to aim down sights, RT or R2 to fire weapons, LS or L3 to sprint or steady aim on snipers, and RS or R3 to melee. This is a great setup for beginners and I would not recommend changing it until you get comfortable. But for a faster gameplay, I use stick and move. Try it later on. Stick layout preset. This determines how your stick movement works. It's best for beginners to keep it at its default. Invert vertical look. This changes whether moving your stick up moves your view up or down, and moving your stick down moves your view down or up. If you're used to games with inverted vertical movement, then enable it, otherwise keep it on default. You can also set it to airborne vehicles only for game modes like Ground War or Warzone. Dead Zone. This is just the point where the stick is registered. Basically, a low number means you can move with little movement of the stick, and a higher number makes you stay still until the stick is at a certain angle before it moves. The default has it at 0.07, though I'd recommend for beginners to have it at around 0.10 for a nice sweet spot. Horizontal stick sensitivity. Now this is going to be one of the more important settings for console players, because it can really affect your gameplay. I won't mix this with vertical sensitivity, because some people have them at different numbers. It starts here at 4. Personally, I would start at this until you become very comfortable with it, and then move it up by 1, slowly increasing it as you become more experienced. Just don't rush into it, increasing the number by 1 each day. I like mine around 11, but that's come from a lot of experience. Vertical stick sensitivity. This is very similar to horizontal, but can be different because most of your movement is horizontal in this game, especially when starting out. Some people like to have this lower for a smoother lock on, but I'd recommend for beginners to leave both sensitivities the same until you become more experienced with the same rule above of slowly increasing the number as you improve. ADS sensitivity multiplier. Low zoom. This is an advanced setting to change your sensitivity on lower magnification levels from 3.25 to iron sights. I'd recommend beginners to leave it at its default 1 to start and then increase it a little. I like to have it on about 1.2. ADS sensitivity multiplier high zoom. This is the same as low zoom, but for magnification levels that are 3.25 or higher. I'd recommend to leave it at its default 1 to get used to it, but once you get more experience, then try lowering it a little to be able to get a smooth snap on. My preferred number is 0.8. Aim response curve type. Now this one might get a little complicated. This changes the curve response from the pressure you put towards rotating your right stick, or left stick for lefties. The 3 options are standard, linear, and dynamic. Standard is the default and is best for new to average players, because you may not think about your aim response much in the beginning, and even only now I've decided to switch. Standard starts with a slow aim response, while gradually building up speed as you turn your right stick more, making it great for a lot of players. Linear is interesting, and yet may be difficult for beginners and average players, because aim in the game responds to the exact amount of pressure you put towards turning your stick. I would not recommend using this one unless you have already become experienced and take the time to adjust to it. Dynamic is the third option and seems to be great for more experienced players. It has a complex aim response that gradually builds up related to the stick movement, but then greatly increases to the input of the stick movement to be able to get a fast lock on. This one would be very difficult for beginners because it could throw off their timing and aiming, as you may not be used to paying attention to the response of your aiming yet, but it's great for more experienced players. If you want a more thorough explanation of the 3 curve types, click through the link provided in the description for a complete breakdown on them. Controller vibration. This is self-explanatory, as it chooses whether or not your controller has vibration. For beginners who have never played Call of Duty or first-person shooters, then vibration is a must-have. which every time you're getting shot at by guns or kill streaks, it vibrates the controller, which is great to teach the mind when and how to react. When you get used to it though, I'd suggest to turn it off. The next section is weapons, which has 7 parts. Aim assist. This one is important for beginners because it can really help them catch enemies as they approach them. There's 4 settings: disabled, standard, precision, and focusing. Disabled takes away all aim assist. Standard is the default, which has normal slowdown on aim near targets, which is great for beginners to keep it on this. Precision has a strong slowdown, but only when aiming closely to targets. I'd only recommend this once you're more experienced and can handle aim assist pretty well. Focusing has a very strong slowdown that kicks in when narrowly missing targets, which is very noticeable for hipfire moments. This one I recommend for beginners to use because it can really help you get kills when you haven't adjusted to playing yet. I personally use it myself as it helps get a better snap onto enemies. Weapon mount activation. This changes the action of what activates your mounting. There's 4 settings: disabled, double tap ADS, ADS plus melee, and ADS. Disabled removes the ability to mount altogether. Double tap ADS means that you have to press the aim button twice or add an obstacle. I wouldn't recommend this one because it takes too much time to mount and you may accidentally have unwanted mounts. ADS plus melee is the default, which requires you to aim near an obstacle and then click melee. It's good for pretty much all players as it's convenient to do. ADS means that all you have to do is click aim near an obstacle and you instantly mount. I personally would not recommend this one as it would cause you a lot of unwanted mounts and potential deaths. Weapon mount movement exit. This changes how you get out of mounting. It has 2 settings: disabled and enabled. Disabled makes it so you only have to release ADS to get out of your mount. Enabled is interesting, as I wasn't aware I could do this. You can get out of a mount by pressing the input button. What makes this good is that you can unmount while still aiming. So you can mount to get kills, and then click to unmount, and then get enemies that are too far for the mount to reach and get them off guard. Aim down sight behavior. This changes how you get in and out of aim. You can either set it to hold or toggle. Hold is the default and traditional for Call of Duty games, which is the best for beginners. Toggle is a little more complex, where you only have to click to aim once and let go, where you will stay in aim until you click the aim button again. This one is good for players who may get a sore finger so you don't have to continuously hold down the button, but it may get a little annoying because you have to constantly click the aim button multiple times just to aim while shooting at enemies. Equipment behavior. This changes how you use equipment with 2 settings: hold and toggle. Hold is the default, a recommended setting because it allows you to use your equipment in a smooth flow. Toggle is odd because you click once to pull out the equipment like a frag or Semtex, and then you have to click again to throw it. This one may be annoying for you because until you click again, you'll be holding the equipment forever, which would not be smart for frags. Use and reload behavior. This changes how the button works for using and reloading. There's 3 settings: tap to reload, tap to use, and contextual tap. Tap to reload is the default and is great for beginners because it teaches the basic action of tapping to reload, where you have to hold the button to use things like doors or munition boxes. Tap to use is a complete reverse as you tap to open doors and use things, where you hold to reload. I would not recommend this one because it will slow you down a lot in close gameplay, taking too long to reload. Contextual tap is interesting because it mixes them both together, where you can tap to both reload or use like opening doors, and holding it always reloads. This may not be recommended for beginners or yourself, because if there's a heap of guns surrounding something like a munitions box, then tapping will be a nightmare, because you'll pick up every gun and losing yours, creating a bit of frustration. I personally use this setting, but until you become more experienced, then stick with the first setting. Depleted ammo weapon switch. This changes whether or not your weapon switches when you have no ammo for it. Disabled is the other setting from the default, which is not recommended because when you run out of ammo, you will stay holding the gun. Now a lot of people would have the instinct to click the button to switch weapons, but for all of you beginners and people starting out, you may not notice that you have no ammo. Or you may come up to an enemy, go to shoot it, and all you hear is click, click, dead. So unless you want to run around and bash people with it, then I say to avoid having it disabled. Enabled means that the second you run out of ammo and try to shoot, it automatically switches to your other gun. I'd recommend this for beginners and just about everyone to leave it enabled. The third section is movement with 5 parts. Slide behavior. This changes how you slide in the game with 2 settings, hold or tap. Hold is the default where you hold down the crouch button to slide. This is great for beginners, so it would be best to keep it as this. Tap allows you to tap while running and you'll slide instantly. I use this setting myself because I'm always sliding a lot. If you're not used to sliding yet though, then it might not be best for you because you may have a lot of unwanted slides. Auto move forward. This setting allows you to have automatic movement or not, with 2 settings, enabled and disabled. Disabled makes it so you don't have auto movement. Enabled allows you to automatically move by double tapping the left stick forward, which makes you go on an endless walk, and clicking the stick after makes you run endlessly, and repeatedly clicking after activates tac sprint. I would not recommend having this enabled because it will confuse a lot of beginners because you may struggle to stop the movement, so I would recommend keeping it disabled. Automatic sprint. This allows you to automatically sprint or tac sprint with 3 settings: disabled, automatic sprint, and automatic tac sprint. Disabled makes sprinting only happen by clicking the left stick. Automatic sprint makes it so that you sprint the second you move forward. You can only walk by slightly tilting the left stick. Automatic tac sprint makes you start in a tac sprint and goes to a normal sprint afterwards, You can keep doing attack sprint by moving forward and then stop doing it for a little bit and doing attack sprint again. I would recommend beginners to keep it disabled to avoid confusion. Vehicle camera recenter. This affects when you're in vehicles by recentering your camera or not. Disabled means your camera will stay where it is while operating a vehicle. Enabled makes the camera move back to the center of the vehicle when you stop moving the camera after a few seconds. It's not that important if you don't play modes with vehicles, but if you do, then I would say to stick with disabled. Because say you're aiming at a spot waiting and then the camera moves itself, making you miss your shot. Parachute auto deploy. This setting only applies to Ground War, Co-op, and Warzone game modes. It has two settings, enabled and disabled. Enabled makes your parachute automatically open when you jump off high enough buildings and before you reach the ground. Disabled means you have to press the jump button while in midair for it to deploy. The next tab is the General tab. The first section here is in-game controller with 5 parts. Input device determines whether or not you're using a controller or keyboard and mouse. Brightness. The default starts at 50 and having it as 0 is too dark and 100 is too bright. Somewhere around 54 is a good place to start. Safe area. This you want to have it as far as it can go towards the edge, unless you like the safe area to be closer. Film grain. This adds a grain effect for visual noise. The default is 0.25, but a personal recommendation is to have it at 0 for a better look. Tool tips. Shows tips for various things. The default is set to enabled. For beginners, it's best to leave it this way. The second section is accessibility with 5 parts. Subtitles. Shows the subtitles at the bottom during gameplay. Disabled is the default, but for beginners starting out, it might help to have it enabled. Colorblind type. This is only for people who are actually colorblind. For those who are, flick the 3 settings to find the best for you. You can use the pause menu map to help decide the colors. World motion blur. This blurs moving objects. The default has it set to enabled, but for a clear experience, have it disabled. Weapon motion blur. This setting blurs your weapon as you're turning, creating a slight realistic effect. The default has enabled, but much like the world motion blur, keep it disabled for a better experience. The third section is HUD, with 3 parts. Minimap shape. This is the shape of your minimap. You have 2 selections, round or square. Round is the default, but it's better to set it as square to see more. Minimap rotation. You can choose to have the minimap rotate or not. The default has it on rotate. I've always used rotate, but if you use the games with a still map, then set it to disabled. Compass cardinal direction text. This is the setting for your compass for whether or not you want letters and numbers, or only numbers, having letters like NESW for north, east, south, or west. Having letters is great to know which direction you're facing, but for beginners who get confused, stick to only numbers for a less to look at. The fourth section is content filters with 3 parts. Text chat. This setting shows whether you receive messages or not. Disabled only shows distant messages, where enabled shows everything. The default is enabled, but if you want less fast, then disabled might be for you. Profanity filter. This chooses whether or not to censor profanities in text. This setting is only available if text chat is enabled. For beginners new to Call of Duty, I highly recommend keeping the filter enabled so you don't see any nasty messages. Dismemberment and gore effects. This setting changes whether you see any form of gore like blood or loss of limbs. Its default is set to enabled, but if gore isn't your strong point or you have a weaker stomach, then it would be best to keep it disabled. The third tab is the audio tab. The first section here is volumes with 7 parts. Audio mix. This is the main setting to balance the sound with your setup. There are 7 mix settings: studio reference, dynamic home theater, midnight mode, boost, boost high, and boost low. Studio reference is a lot quieter than the other settings with max dynamic range, which is better for higher volume levels. Dynamic home theater has higher dynamic range. It's a little louder and also recommended for higher volume levels. Home theater has a moderate dynamic range and doesn't need as high volume levels. It's also louder than the previous 2 settings. It's great for playing with a home theater system. Midnight mode is a quieter audio setting that is great for people playing at night or living in a house with other people. It's great for lower dynamic range with quieter volumes while still providing enough sound in the ends that matter. Boost is the current default setting and it's instantly a lot louder than the first 4 settings. The dynamic range is moderate with neutral equalization. This creates a boost balance of the high and low frequencies to make a boost effect on sound, which is great for headset players. Boost high focuses more on high frequencies by giving them a boost. It has moderate dynamic range, which doesn't need much volume to get enough sound. It's much like the boost setting, but a little better in my opinion, because the game has a lot of high frequency sounds that you need to pay attention to, like footsteps. Boost low is the opposite end of boost high, where it focuses more on the low frequencies with moderate dynamic range. It's great for people who like the sound of amplified explosion sounds. My personal preference is boost high, because you'll be able to hear things like footsteps, door slamming, and gunshots from long distances. Master volume. This is the volume control setting for all sounds and music, so I would recommend leaving at its default 100. Music volume. This is the volume setting for all in-game music. Because the music in the game lasts a little longer than we'd want and can be a little loud, then I recommend taking it from its default 100 to about 70. Dialogue volume. This is the volume setting for all voiceover audio such as talking and yelling. The operators talking and streaming in this game can be too much to handle sometimes, but it's still good to hear what other operators are saying, so I'd move it from the default of 100 down to about 80. Effects volume. This is the volume setting for all in-game effects like footsteps, running, doors opening and closing, gunshots, grenade throws, vehicles, climbing ladders, etc. This one is the most important out of the three because hearing all those things is vital in this game. I only lower a little bit but higher than the others at about 85 other than the default of 100. Juggernaut music. This changes whether or not the music plays while using the Juggernaut killstreak. Even if you've never got the Juggernaut before, when it comes to the time that you do, it does feel pretty awesome to have that music play as you shred with that minigun. Hit marker sound effects. This changes the sound of when your bullets hit an enemy. There's 3 settings: None, Classic, and MW. None makes all hit marker sounds muted. Classic is the old school hit marker sound from older games, great for people who came from the older games. MW is the default and is a more modern sounding hit marker sound. For beginners who have never played COD, then it's best to find one that you like. I personally prefer the classic sounding one because I came from Modern Warfare 3. The last section is voice chat with 6 parts. Voice chat. This setting chooses what you can hear in terms of voice chat. It comes in 4 settings: enabled, disabled, mute everyone except party, and mute everyone except friends. Enabled is the default, which allows you to hear everyone and yourself. Disabled mutes everyone including yourself. Mute everyone except party keeps all people in the party heard but mutes everyone else. You can unmute others manually during a match though. Mute everyone except friends keeps only friends heard with everyone else muted, but you can also manually unmute other players. Personally, I'd recommend beginners to keep it at its default enabled to be able to talk with other people, but if you want to keep to yourself, then set it disabled for a peaceful game in your ears. Voice chat device. This changes where the voices come from. There's 2 choices, headset or speakers. I'd recommend to keep it on headset, unless for some reason you want to hear people through your speakers, or unless you don't have a headset of any kind. Open mic recording threshold. Now unless you have a good knowledge on volume thresholds, then I would recommend keeping this at its default of 3.16. Voice chat volume. This adjusts the volume of the voice chat. I recommend to keep this at its default 100, unless you want to hear the voices quieter or louder. Microphone volume. This setting adjusts the volume of your microphone. Unless you have some idea of how it sounds, then I'd recommend to keep it at its default 100. Voice chat effect. This changes how the voices actually sound in 3 settings: no effect, stealth comms, and classic chatter. No effect is the default and keeps all voices normal. Stealth comms adds the SAS radio effect on voice chats to create an effect like they have in campaign. Classic chatter changes the voice chat to the classic sounding effect like it did in the older games. I personally keep it on no effect for the clearest sound, but if you want to have some fun with it, try stealth comms or classic chatter. Because that's what it's all about in the end. This series is aimed to help you play Modern Warfare so you can have fun while doing so. There is a 4th tab, the account tab, but that is not important because it only displays personal information. Okay, that's the end of my second beginner's guide video on best settings. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Make sure to leave a comment below to let me know what you liked about the video. Also, if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and turn on that notification bell to keep up to date with this series. I upload each video every Saturday, so stay tuned for my Modern Warfare Beginner's Guide. Thanks for watching guys, I'm CJ Gamer, and I'll see you in the next one.